everyone for being here today. So welcome everyone to this ArchivesSpace community training on data cleanup and maintenance for longtime ArchivesSpace users. I'm Rachel Searcy, use she, her pronouns, and I'm the accessioning archivist at New York University. I'm here today with my fellow trainer, Miloche Kottman, and I will let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Miloche Kottman. I'm the head of cataloging and archival processing at the University of Kansas Libraries.
Great. So in advance of your training, you should have received an email with an agenda for the training and links to all the materials you will need to participate in this workshop and continue learning after the training is over. I'm also going to drop a link directly in the chat now to that same folder in Google Drive. There. We may not stick exactly to the agenda, but we will take the planned break at an appropriate time. Included in the course materials is a quick start guide you can use to supplement today's training. So you can test what you've learned today by using the guide and by creating examples within your own ArchivesSpace instance or in the ArchivesSpace sandbox available on our website. You can access the ArchivesSpace sandbox from the ArchivesSpace Getting Started website, which is linked in your guide with other useful resources. There's also a training evaluation at the end of the agenda, which we hope you will complete after the training is over. But if you have any issues accessing any of these resources, please let us know. We are using Zoom webinar for this training, and your microphone and camera are both muted. If you'd like to ask questions, we ask that you please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. That helps keep all the questions together and makes it so that we don't miss any of your questions. That said, if you have a general question or need some other form of assistance, please feel free to reach out in the chat. Some questions might be read and answered in the Q&A portion of our time, but we may also answer some questions directly in that Q&A Zoom section. So please be sure to refer to that because there may be some additional information there for you. For the majority of this training, we will be using the latest version of ArchivesSpace, which is version 3.5.1. If you're using an earlier version of ArchivesSpace at your organization, just keep in mind that some of the features you see today may not be available to you at home. And we won't be able to troubleshoot issues with your own implementation of ArchivesSpace. But if you are having troubles with your implementation, please feel free to email us at archivespacehome@lyrasis.org. In the last part of today's training, we will look at the new bulk editing functionality that will be available in the forthcoming version 4.0 release. So that will act as a preview. And finally, please keep in mind that there are many participants in this workshop from a variety of institutions with varied experience levels. Remember that the ArchivesSpace Code of Conduct applies to all ArchivesSpace events, including this one. So please be considerate and respectful in your interactions with your fellow participants, Miloche and myself, in the Q&A and the chat. So this training today is focused on strategies for data cleanup and maintenance for users at organizations who have been using ArchivesSpace for a significant amount of time. And everything that we go over today will be possible to do through the staff interface, sometimes with a small asterisk. So we will not address working with the ArchivesSpace API. That said, some of the actions we show do require specific permissions. So whether you can currently do them will depend on how your permissions are set up at your institution. Before I dive into the training, I want to mention that all of the examples we are using today are real collections held by ArchivesSpace member organizations. These organizations have made their metadata available to the program for the purposes of education and training, and in the interest of creating a more diverse set of example data. So we are very grateful for that. I would also just like to introduce myself more fully. Like I said, my name is Rachel Searcy, and I've been involved with ArchivesSpace for about 8 years now. At NYU, I worked on our migration to ArchivesSpace from Archivist Toolkit, and I act as our primary administrator. I've also served on the ArchivesSpace Advisory Council, and I'm the immediate past chair of the Technical Advisory Council. I've been working in academic archives for the past 12 years, so many of my references and examples are going to be informed by that perspective. If I say something that doesn't match your process, please feel free to ask for clarity. We all know that there are many different processes, workflows, and use cases in archives, and that is true for ArchivesSpace as well. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and move directly into the training. So Malaka, I'm going to minimize my chat and my Q&A. So if you see or hear anything that you want to alert me to, please let me know.
Will do.
Thank you. Okay. All right. Let's get into it. So we're going to start today by talking about preferences. ArchivesSpace allows for the configuration of what we call global and repository preferences in the staff user interface. And spending a little time configuring your preferences can be really useful in terms of sort of molding ArchivesSpace to your staff and your workflows. You can make modifications to ensure that you get the information you need, you see less of the information that you don't, and you're able to access it in easier ways. So there are a few categories of preferences that we will go over. So to see preferences, you're going to go to the upper right corner of your screen near the icon with your username, and you want to click this downward arrow. And depending on your permissions, what you see will depend on your permissions. So I am currently logged in as the admin, so you might see something different. Global preferences, this first option, these are system-wide preferences. So if you work in a multi-repository instance, the preferences that you set here will apply to all of your repositories. But they can be overridden by the next category underneath, which we'll get to in a moment. Do keep in mind, though, that these preferences, even though they are called global, they apply only to you, like your individual user. So that is sort of a key here with these first two, where it says global preferences, admin in parentheses. If you see your username in parentheses, that's a clear indicator that the preferences are only for you as the user, if that makes sense. The next category is repository preferences. So these are, again, tied to your user account, but they're preferences for a specific repository. And then this last category, which you may or may not see depending on your permission level at your institution, called default repository preferences. These are preferences for a specific repository, your active repository, that can override individual user preferences for that repository. And they apply to all users, and they can only be set by someone who has the permissions of a repository manager or a system manager. Before we dive into some specific preferences that you can adjust, I do want to note that this is something that has changed a lot through different releases. So if you are on an earlier version of ArchivesSpace, I would suggest that you refer to the user manual, which has information for how settings work tied to different releases. And there are also a few active development tickets regarding preferences. So this is something that is likely to continue to evolve with future releases. So like I said, to get to your preferences, go to the upper right-hand corner near your user icon and click the downward arrow. So I'm just going to work with the global preferences to show you, but you can work with them at these other levels if you would prefer. So we have a few different categories to cover. At the top here, we have what are called general settings. I'm actually going to make my screen a little bigger. General settings, which are settings that apply to kind of a lot of different record types across the application. Show suppressed allows you to see records that have been suppressed. And these records are still in the repository, but they will not appear in search results in the staff interface unless this box is checked. And this is true even if a user has the permission to view suppressed records. Publish will set newly created accession, resource, digital object, and agent records to publish by default. And just wanting to clarify, this does not change the values of pre-existing records. Display rapid data entry templates alphabetically is relatively self-explanatory, as is include unpublished records and exports. Pre-populate records indicates that the user prefers to use pre-populated templates when creating new accession or resource records with default values. Malaka is going to talk about managing default values in a little, so we'll get into that later. Spawn description for digital object instances from linked records. So if that is something you would like to take advantage of, that's a preference that you need to set before that functionality becomes available to you. And then language selection. So as of version 2.8.0, I believe, users have the option to select their preferred language for the staff user interface. The currently available languages are English, French, German, and Spanish. So these things can be really helpful in terms of making ArchivesSpace run a little more efficiently for you and can potentially proactively ward off some future data cleanup needs. So for example, this publish checkbox preference. Let's say that, for example, you, as a general rule, want all of your records to have that publish checkbox checked, but sometimes your users forget to do it, leaving you with some cleanup work to do, or maybe just having to make a lot of reminders. So selecting this preference so that all newly created records have this checked by default can be a huge time saver. The next section, called note order, this allows you to determine a specific order that you would like notes in resource or digital object records to appear in. So by default, notes appear in the order in which they are created, but if you would like for them to appear in alphabetic or another particular order, you could set that here just by sort of dragging these gray lines around. So let's say, you know, maybe I want them in alphabetic order. So I want abstract, and then I want appraisal. You can just drag them to the place that you want them. And then once you have this preference saved, when you're in a resource record and you have notes created, you can then select the button called Applied Standard Note Order, and they will reorder. I do want to be clear about what this does and does not do. So this reordering only applies to the staff interface view. It does not impact the order of notes in either an EAD file or in the public user interface. That said, it can still be a really useful workflow aid, perhaps to ensure that archivists have created all of the notes that are considered required at your particular institution. Maybe it makes reviewing other people's work easier. So it still has utility, even if it's only applicable in this narrow way. So you can also adjust the columns for your search and browse results. And by this, I mean that you can select which pieces of information show up, as well as the order in which they appear. So there are a lot of options for the browse column. So this long list, accessions, agents, archival objects, assessments, I won't read them all, but you get the idea that basically anything you can browse for, you, I believe, perhaps have the ability to set preferences for. I perhaps should have checked that before saying that. I'm not going to demonstrate all of these, but I would like for us to look at a few. So we are going to look at the resource record browse columns, as I imagine many people browse for research records. So before we change anything, let's first browse for resource records to see what it looks like by default. So I'm just going to open up another tab to do that. So I'm going to browse resources. And this is what it looks like, just sort of using the default settings. So let's see, we have the title, we have our identifier, we have the level, dates, and the extent. So this is really great information, but I personally can think of a few things that I would like to see added to this list. And then at my institution, all of our resource records get the level of collection. So just personally, I don't think it's particularly valuable for me to see that in this browse table. But obviously, like, everyone is going to have different needs. But this is what it looks like right now. So let's go back to preference management. And we're going to go down to here, resource browse columns. And these columns match what we were just looking at. So let's see. I said I don't particularly want level, so I'm gonna go to where it's currently the current column 3. And let's see, I would perhaps like to see if the record is published or not. And then we have columns 6 and 7, which are kind of our empty spaces. So we can add additional values if we want. So I would like to see when the record was created. And I would also like to see when it was modified. But I'm just going to leave this drop down open for a second so that you can see other options. So for example, if it would be helpful for you to see information about restrictions, finding aid status, the processor, language, the EAD ID, you could choose those as well. You are limited to 7 columns, so you might have to make some choices, but you do have a fair amount of control there. I can also change the default sort column, which is currently set to title. And actually, I would prefer it personally if that sort column were the identifier. So I'm going to change that for myself. And I can also change the default sort direction, so either ascending or descending. I'm going to leave that as is because I kind of like to toggle with the sort direction, so it doesn't make sense for me to change it. So once I'm happy with my selections, I'm going to click this blue Save Preferences button down here. And I will get, hopefully, a green message saying that my preferences have been updated. So let's go back to browsing for resources, and we'll see what our new browse table looks like. So I'm just gonna browse again. And now we can see that we not only have, a larger table or more columns, but our changes have been put into place. That level column is gone. It's been replaced by this published column, which I asked for, as well as the created and modified columns. And the identifier is now my primary sort column. You can tell that because it's the one in blue and has that downward arrow. You can sort by other columns, but again, this is my primary default or primary sort column. So this is kind of a simple change, but if this is something that you regularly do and would like to see different things, this is something that you have the power to change. So another area where you might want to adjust your browse preferences is the last option in this list called Top Container Management Browse. I'm going to go there. This is actually a change that came into effect with version 3.5.0. So just like before, let's do a top container browse just straight up before we change anything. So open up a new tab. And I am going to search for just one of the collections that I know is in this repository. And I see that I have the title of my resource and the identifier. I get the container type and indicator and barcode. But I would really love if the location for my boxes would be included in this search right off the bat. And for me personally, the series column isn't especially helpful when I'm looking for boxes, and we don't use the internal note. So, if I have the ability to control what I see here, I might take some things away and add some things. But again, these are just sort of based on my experiences. So you should think of what you need and what you want to see. So we'll go back to preference management and go on to top container management browse. And let's see, I said I didn't particularly want to see series, but I would really like location. I want to keep container profile. I want to keep type. I want to keep indicator. I want to keep barcode. Like I said, we don't use internal notes for containers, so maybe I can put something else here that would be more helpful. So maybe restricted or not might be more useful. You don't have to use all the columns. You can either say no value, or you can add something that, is nice to have, but not critical. It's kind of up to you. And for the default sort column, I typically do a lot of searches for just collection by collection, although not always. So instead of the sort by resource, I would prefer them to sort by indicator, because that's more likely to show kind of my boxes sort of in a 1, 2, 3 way that's easy for me to understand. You can also just sort of change the order in which these show up. So if you wanted location to be last, you could do that. You could kind of move them around, basically make it so that it's easy for you. So I'm happy with what I've changed here, and I'm gonna save my preferences again. And let's redo our container search. So sadly, some of this information is not in this test database, but you can at least see the way that the columns are set up matches the preferences that we altered. So now I'll be able to see the container's location, as well as whether they're restricted or not. And I don't have those columns for series and internal note that I knew I was never going to use. So it didn't make sense for me to keep them in my table if I didn't want it. So that is how you change some of the browse columns. But like I said, there's a very long list of browsing results that you have the ability to adjust how you see them. In addition to adjusting your browse columns, you can do the same thing for your search results. So that's right here in alphabetic order, search columns. Again, not to be too on the nose, but This is absolutely up to your own preference, to what, if anything, you want to change here. So kind of like before, I personally really like to have those created and modified dates in my results table. I just find them helpful. So I'm going to add them here. But let me just open up one of these drop-down menus again. You can see that there are other options that you could potentially apply. So just saving my results again. And if I do a search for, let's see, ephemera, you can see that in my search results that I have those created and modified columns that I asked for. Okay, great. So see, we're maybe a little over time, but that's okay. We will move on. ArchivesSpace, we're going to talk about managing controlled value lists now. ArchivesSpace has many sets of controlled values, which are used to populate drop-down fields in accession, resource, digital object, subject, agent, and other records in the application. So these lists help ensure data consistency and also make entering data values more efficient. The controlled value lists also enable you to set a default value for a particular field so that a data entry user doesn't have to enter information in that field unless that default value is not appropriate in that situation. Regularly reviewing and managing your controlled value lists really does help with overall system usability. So this is a good thing for overall application maintenance and another way to prevent the need for future data cleanup work. There are two types of controlled value lists, configurable and non-configurable. A configurable list can be modified, so values can be added, edited, merged, or deleted by people with system administrator, repository manager, or project manager positions. Just a quick note that new values are also added to controlled value lists as the result of importing data from CSV, EAC CPF, EAD, or Merck XML files. So let's look at one of these configurable lists. To get to your controlled value list, you want to go up to the top to this system dropdown and click Manage Controlled Value Lists. We are just going to quickly look at the extent type list to show you what a configurable list looks like. So one of the ways that we know this is a configurable list is all of these available options on the right-hand side, the ability to suppress, to merge, and delete. That would not be possible in the second type of list, which is called a non-configurable controlled value list. They cannot be modified, usually because an application process or exported data format depends on the values in that list. So an example of this is the archival record level list, which I will bring up. So anytime that you create a component and there's that level dropdown you need to fill in, that comes from this list. They have to remain compliant with the level attribute in EAD if the exported EAD can be valid. So that is why it is non-configurable. Although they can't be edited, non-configurable lists can be edited. Although they cannot be edited, deleted, or merged, you do still have some options for managing this type of list. You can change the order in which the values appear. You can set a value as a default, or you can suppress a value so that it doesn't show up as an option. And again, just for clarity, it's easy to see that this is a non-configurable list because on the right, our only options are set as default or suppress. So just to repeat, to get to your controlled value lists, you're going to go to System, Manage Controlled Value Lists, And then you're going to select the list that you want by clicking this downward arrow under list name and choosing the desired list title. So the list names appear in their descriptive form first, followed by their actual table or field name in parentheses. And then you're going to click on the list that you want to work with. So I'm going to go back to extent type. And the view of the list displays the following. It has the value, so the value that is stored in the data record, the translation, which is the display form of the value, which is something that can be localized to the instance that you're working in. The position, so this is the numerical position of a value in a list from top to bottom. So for example, megabytes is number 5. That means it's going to be the 5th item from the top in the list. Suppress, whether or not the value will display in the interface. So if a value is suppressed, there'll be a checkbox in this column here. Default indicates which value in a list, if any, is the default value that will populate new records. A list can only have one default value. And then on the right, we have these configuration options. So set as default, suppress, merge, or delete. And then all the way at the right, we have the frequency of use, which is the number of times that the value has been used in the active repository. And if you clicked on that, it would display all the records in which the value is occurring. You also have a create value button, which is an option for adding new values to a configurable list. And just to repeat, this option will not be available in a non-configurable list. So to add a new value to a controlled value list, you're going to navigate to the list that you want to be in, and you are going to click this create value button. This command will open up a form where a new value may be added. So in the value field, type the name of the value you wish to create. And you just want to keep in mind any sort of export or compatibility issues to ensure that, the value doesn't have spaces in the name. So let's see. I am going to add terabytes to this extent type list. And then I'm going to say create value. I could also cancel if I change my mind. So the newly created value will be added to the controlled value list. It might have already been in there. And just a quick note that for locally created values, that the value and translation are going to be the same. But I'll talk about how you change the translation in a moment. Actually right now. So maybe a better example instead of this extent type list would be if I wanted to add a different subject source for subject records. So let's say at my institution, we want to start using Homosaurus, which is not currently in the list of subject sources. So I'm going to select create value. And for the value, I'm going to use the mark source code for this vocabulary because I want to ensure compliance with exports. So I'm going to use that code and select create value. And so because that's a newly created, locally created value, the value and the translation are the same. But I would really like for in the display, like in the drop-down menu, when people are creating subjects, that this says Homosaurus. So this is one of the places where there's a bit of an asterisk to when I said everything can be done in the staff user interface. This is a place where you might need to do something beyond that or request a change from your hosting provider. If you're using a hosting provider, you can request that they change this translation for you. But if you have access to the system files for your installation, you can edit them. So I'll show you where that is, but I don't want to go through the whole process because it is a little more beyond the scope of what we're talking about today. But you'll want to go to one of the locales files under the enum enumerations folders in your system file. So it's called, here's where it's sort of located within the code, common, locales, enums, and then because I'm using an English installation, it's the en YAML file. So then you want to go to that section of the file that we're working with. So we're working with the subject code section. And this is where you can see the values and the translations. So basically what you want to do is create a local version of this that has your correct information. So I'm just going to bring it up, what that might look like. So I have this open in a text editor, and hopefully you can see this is that same subject source list, but there are a few other options here. So we have Homosaurus, and we have the code, colon, and our translation. So that's a way that you can make that adjustment. I'm skipping some steps with how you kind of put that into effect, but I don't want to get too far off course. You can also set the order in which values are displayed vertically from top to bottom in a controlled value list. And doing this can allow you to put the most frequently used values at the top of the list, just reducing the need to kind of scroll down. So a great example I can think of is with instances and containers. So at my institution, we use a variety of terms here, but far and away, the ones that we use most often are box and folder. And so it would be really nice if those could be at the top of our list, both for just ease of use and also preventing errors in selecting the wrong value. So we're going to go to that controlled list. So we're going to go to the container type list. Here we are, container type. And changing the order is really easy. Actually, it looks like box is already up here, but let's say we want folder to be the second option. The way we do that is in this position column, we just click on these upward or downward arrows so that it goes where we want it. So we're going to click on the upward arrow for folder until it is in that position. And it is as easy as that. So it's really simple, but sometimes with long lists, especially if you have to kind of go down towards the end, it can be really easy to choose the wrong option. So that's kind of a quick, easy thing that you can do to prevent future data entry errors. You can also suppress values from a list. So let's talk about a non-configurable list, because this is one of the few things you can do there. Like I said, you can't delete them, but you can suppress values from a list, a non-configurable list. That can make it easier if it's maybe a large list that you just want it to be easier for your staff to work with. So maybe that languages list. Or if you know that you will never use certain terms, this can also be helpful. So I can share an example of something that we have done at my institution to sort of prevent people from using something we don't want them to use, which is this date certainty part of the date subrecord. This is a perfectly valid thing to record, but we just didn't want to introduce this level into our date kind of documentation. So basically what we did is suppressed all the values in this list just by clicking suppress. And then let's see, if we go to a resource record, and I'll just kind of show you what that looks like. So let's say, oops. Oh, I think I forgot to do one of them, sorry. But basically what it would, actually, let me go back and do it for real. Oh, sorry, I can't suppress this all because it's actually in use. Anyway, I'm sorry. What I wanted to convey though was that you can, that is sort of one application, is to potentially suppress everything in a list, and that way there's sort of nothing for people to select. I hope that wasn't too confusing of an example by not working. We are gonna move into the rest of controlled value lists by talking about default values. So this is a value that will automatically appear in that data field whenever a new record is created. You can change this at any time, and changing that value isn't going to changing that default value won't change anything for pre-existing records. We do recommend that you only set a default value in controlled value lists in cases where that default value is going to be correct for sort of 75% of the time or higher. Otherwise, it doesn't really, it's not really worth it. So let's say, for example, that you really prioritize compliance with DAX, Describing Archives of Content Standard, which is the American Archival Descriptive Standard. So you could set this as a default in the description rules field, which is part of the finding aid data portion of the resource record. So I am going to go to the list that is resource finding aid description rules. And I see this, the third row, DAX. So I'm going to say set as default. And I can see it's a default because it has this checkbox here. So if I were to create a new resource, and I went to the finding aid data section in this description rules field, I can see that Describing Archives of Content Standard is already there. I can still change this value if I want. So if, for example, this record that didn't turn out to be appropriate, I can always change it, but it's sort of helping me along. Another thing you can do is merge terms. So sometimes you might have duplicate or variant forms of the same value. And this is especially true if you do like a lot of imports or migration. But you can remove these variants through the merge option, which collapses those values together. So something that I think happens a lot is those container type values often get duplicated a lot. So you might have a lot of box and a lot of folder, or just kind of similarities. So let's see, I have 2 boxes, I have 2 folders, and so I would like to merge them together so that I don't have both of them in my list. So you're going to want to click merge at on the right here for the one that you don't want to keep. So I'm going to go to this one down here, click merge, and then it's asking me what I want to merge it into, so sort of like the target record. So I want to merge it into this other box value. And you can kind of just keep doing that until your list is cleaned up. One last thing is that you can also delete values from your controlled value list to make them shorter and easier to scroll through. Just a quick note that if those values are referenced in an existing record in ArchivesSpace, you can't delete them. So you would either need to merge those values or change the value in that particular record, but you can't delete a list value that's currently in use. But let's say I want to get rid of this last row here, this electronic records, Maybe it's from a legacy practice. Maybe it's something we cleaned up, but I don't want this in my list anymore. Deleting this value is really easy. You just click this delete button and you'll be asked to confirm it. And I do. And then that won't appear in your list anymore. So now you are able to manage your controlled value lists. And with that, I will pass things off to Malaka to talk about managing default values.
We have a couple of questions.
Okay.
One of them is, can you universally update values here, or will changes you make only apply going forward?
Changes will only apply going forward.
And then the other question is, what is the relationship between things in the value column and the translation column?
Yeah, actually, I think this would be easier if I shared my screen again. So let me do that. So the value column refers to how the information is stored in the database, whereas the translation is what shows up in the staff interface and I believe the public user interface, although I'm not positive on that. But let's see, it can move back to this subject source list. And this list is a little bit wild because it has some test data in it, but so for example, this homosaurus term that I added, this is the mark approved name for the vocabulary, and we want it stored like that in the database. We also want it like that so that when we export a mark record, that the subfield 2 for the other source specified gets that mark code, and we don't get like validation errors, for example. But the translation is for kind of human readability within the interface. So if I were to create a new subject record, and when I want to identify the source, I can still identify it as being a homosaurus record, even now, but I have to know that that's what that kind of code means. It would be so much easier if it were more like at the top where it said, art and architecture thesaurus or Library of Congress subject headings or medical subject headings. So the translation is for human readability and understanding. The value is for computer processing and understanding. I hope that makes sense.
All right, I will share my screen now. And there we go. Get that out of my way. I hate that thing. Okay. I'm going to be talking about templates that are available in the ArchivesSpace interface that can make some of your data entry easier. If you want to check it out in your quick start guide, it's on page 6. Users can set default values throughout the application. Default values are typically set when the value of the field is the same across most records. For instance, a segment of the identifier in a session or a resource record might indicate the custodial repository, for example, RC. If the repository identifier is set as a default value for a segment of the session or resource identifier, then the identifier will be populated with that segment whenever a new session or resource record is created. In short, setting default values for repetitive data values is a good way for repositories to streamline data input. Default values can be edited in a record once applied, and default values can be reset at any time. Doing so will have no impact on applications of the prior default value. They will be retained in the records in which they were applied. Please note, default values are not applied when spawning an accession or resource record from an accession record. So to use templates with default values, the pre-populate records option must be turned on in preferences. As Rachel explained earlier, to set global or repository default values, you need to log into ArchivesSpace and have the user group that would show these values. So I'm going to set it for the repository preference. Click on that, and you're going to want to have this pre-populate records. You are going to want to have the check mark in there, and then you just save it. And now you have the ability to create default templates. You can access the default value templates via the Browse menu. The, 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 the templates are available for most record types. However, they're not available for container profiles, collection management, assessments, and background jobs. So let's actually create a default template for accession records. So we will do a browse of accessions. And you'll see here that you have this button that says Edit Default Values. We'll click on that. And it opens up and it looks just like a session record that you would create like normal. So if all your session records are going to start with the same first word in the title, you could add that word there. Like if you want to say a session of or something. What I'm going to do is I'm going to say that all of our session identifiers are going to start with the year. So obviously in a couple of months, I would need to change it to 2025. But for right now, I could use 2024 as the first segment of my identifier. If I want to change this monthly and if my identifier includes the month and I want to change it monthly, I could just put in the 11 for November there also. And those are the only default values I might want for this record. So I would click on Save. And then if I click on Create and then I click on a session, you'll see it's pre-populated right there. Pretty handy for accession records. Now let's create one for a resource record. Browse resources. When I click on this Edit Default Values, you're going to see two options. I could put in default values for the resource record itself, or I could create default values for resource component records. I'm going to create just for the resource itself. So just like the accession record, it looks just like a blank resource record. Luckily, it says resource record defaults here so that you know you're not at a resource record. Let's see, if the bulk of your stuff is going to be collection level, you could go ahead and set that to collection. I think most people do. If you always have restrictions, go ahead and put a check mark in the restrictions box. This language, most people set the language default in their controlled value list of English, for example. But if you don't, or you're not the system administrator and can't, then you could set it here. I could put that it's in English, and I could put that the script is Latin here, and then it'll be the default for everybody. The extents, obviously, you usually have a whole portion, so I think that's why this is already filled out for you. Finding a data, that too has a language of description, so I would fill that out as English. And this would be Latin. And then the thing I want that we do frequently is we have notes that are on every record. So you could, if you have that also, you could do that. So for example, conditions governing access, we could put no access restrictions. And then if when I create a record, I actually have access restrictions, I will be able to come in and just change this node or delete this node if I want to. So it's not like set in stone forever. And the other things I like to do, we prefer to have an abstract in every record. And so I go ahead and create an abstract note, but I leave it blank. And I'll show you what will happen when I save this and try to create a record. So let's go ahead and save this default template. And then I'm going to create a resource record. So it has the English in there. The whole was already in there. The English is here, which I added also. And I have this note, no access restrictions in the conditions governing access. And then it does say abstract, but it doesn't have any information in it because, of course, everything has a different abstract, hopefully. That's how you tell the difference between this collection and that collection. So if I tried to, well, let's create a title, test title, and the identifier will be 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll click on dates. We have to do a date, don't we? Creation, fine, and we'll do single, and we will do 1976. And we'll do save resource. And you'll see that the number is missing here. One set. And let's see, if we save resource, that goes away. Content, at least one item is required. So that is down here where the abstract is. And so when we have students or volunteers and we tell them to do the abstract, they don't do the abstract. This will remind them that they have to do the abstract. So that's what that is for. And save, and now you have a record. Ta-da! In addition to the default values, the browse results for agent records. So let me show you the browse results for agent records. So it includes edit default values, and you may see, depending on your permissions, this edit required fields. This is a proof of concept and it's only available on agent records. They were mainly trying to see if it was possible for a local institution to set their own fields as being default, i.e. putting that little red asterisk in front of a field. So let me show you for agent records. If you did this, you would click on edit required fields. You would pick what type of record you want to mess with the default values on. I'll do person because people are most familiar with that one. And so if you want a sub-record, so if I want record IDs to always be open and required to be filled out, I would click here where it says require sub-record. I could do anything else. Like if I want the source to have to be a sub-record that's required, and I want a descriptive note every time, I would put check marks there. In the name form, if I wanted to say, oh, you always have to have a source and you always have to have a rules, and then I would save this person record, and then I could go to create, and I could go to agent and select person. And so now you'll see that in sources, it has a descriptive note is required. What was that other thing I had? Record ID? Yeah, so record identifier and source is required for record IDs. And in the name form, I have source and rules are required. So you could play with that. You may have had records already in that don't have rules set up, and those records are fine. But if you go in and try to edit them, then it's going to require that you add the rules. So be careful with using that functionality. So I think that is it for the templates. Is there any questions about that?
We do have one question.
Okay.
Someone asked, are these revisions to resource records through the edit default values retained when spawning a resource record from an accession record?
If you are spawning a record from an accession record, anything you've set up in a resource record default template will not be applied. Does that make sense?
I believe so. I've actually never used both at the same time. So
Yeah, it's only when you click on create and choose one of these options that that template is applied. So any spawning will disappear. Or, if you used the default to set up some accession record preferences, those will be mapped over as usual based on the mapping between spawning an accession record to a resource record.
thanks.
All right, we will move on to merging subject and agent records. Agent and subject record variants can enter the application through import as well as through data entry errors, because we never make those, right? The merge function is useful for consolidating these duplicate-ish records, since linked records will automatically be relinked to the merged agent and subject records. The process for merging agent records is different from merging subject records. This is because merging agent records allows you to complete the records, to compare the records and choose which fields you want to retain in the keep record. So let's go to browse, and we will go to agents. Leave. Well, I should probably get rid of the edit required fields that I did, since I'm messing with these records. You could easily, I wish there was a return to default, but there isn't. But you could see which ones are by default here versus the ones you might have required based on the lovely blue check marks. Name forms, we'll get rid of that, and save person again. Yay. Okay, now we will browse agents, and let's type in KERN. I created these. They have really no relation to the records that they're linked to. I just wanted examples. So we got 3 Richard Kerns, 2 that look exactly the same, only how they have different sources, and 1 that has a date. Let's look at these records. Click on View, open link in a new tab, and open link in a new tab. Okay, so this first one, you could tell, so this one is agent person record number 33. It has the heading itself, and it has a variant, and it's linked to Native Americans in Film Collection, a resource record. This record doesn't have the variant, but it does have contact information that I certainly wouldn't want to lose if I merged the records, and it's linked to an accession record. And then we have the NAF record, and it has a date, and I know it's the NAF record because it has this NAF ID, and was likely imported in, because who goes to all the trouble to set up all that stuff? So I want to use the NAF record, and I want the contact information, and I want all the records that it's linked to, because this one is not linked to any records, but I want all the records that the other 2 names linked to this record. So what I will do is get rid of that and that and that and go back here. You could do this from either the View menu or the Edit menu. It doesn't really matter which one you have open. So I'm going to click on Edit. And unlike the controlled value list merge, where you're picking the one you want to get rid of, for agent and subject record merges, you're going to open up the record you want to keep. So I click on Edit here, and I have this merge up here. So I click on that, and then I could type in the search to find these records. So I got Kern, Richard. So I'll select that first one, and I click on Merge, and it gives you this message that more or less is like, are you sure you really want to do this? And you're going to say yes. Or if you don't want to do it, you say no, cancel. So I'm going to compare the agents, and it shows the side by side what the records are, and you could compare the differences and decide what you want to keep or get rid of. So far, I don't see anything on the side that I want to keep. So this, obviously, this record will be updated. This record will be deleted. So I have nothing from the original bad record that I want to keep. So I could just click merge here. And now let's merge the other record. So we do the search again, Kern, and the other person is there. I click on merge, compare agents. Now this time, I see that I have the contact details, whereas there's no contact details here. I want all this information moved to the record I want to keep, so I could just click on add. If there were any fields up here that I wanted to keep, I would just click on replace, and that would replace the thing that's right next to it. But it's the same, so why bother? Now, if I'm not sure what this is going to look like, I could use the merge preview. And so it shows me what the record will look like if I do merge it. So here's the record. I have the cross references, and it shows that the contact details are going to come over. So I could click continue or the X to close it. I know a lot of people were like, wait, I didn't want to merge it. This is just closing the window. It's not actually doing the merge yet. So if you had made a mistake, you have time to go back and fix it. So click on merge and ta-da. And then let's do a refresh. Keep in mind, this is one of those test databases, so things take a little while to re-index, but it has had enough time that at least the resource record has come over. Let's see if the session record is there yet. No, of course not. And one more time. Well, trust me, it'll be there. Let's go and try to merge subject records. Subject records are much easier because you're not doing the compare thing. Instead, let's see, one more time. Yes. So now your session and resource record are both there and attached, and you didn't have to go in and do anything much. Let's see. Let's do a browse for subjects. So subject records, you don't have to compare. And so agent records, because you're comparing, you could only do one at a time. For subject records, since you're not comparing, you could do as many merges in one go as you want. So I did a browse for subjects. I'm going to go to the third screen and go down to here. We have baker, we have bakeries, we have bakers, and we have bakers and bakeries. Granted, bakers and bakeries is actually supposed to split, and you have to choose whether it's a baker or a bakery, but today we're going to be lazy, and I want everything in the bakers and bakeries subject heading instead of having all those other records around. So what I'm going to do is go to the bakers and bakeries record, and I'm going to use the view this time just to prove that you can merge. So baker and bakeries, and I'm going to say merge. And let's type in BAK. So I want the baker record in there, and I want the bakeries in there, and I want the plural of bakers in there. So you see, they kind of disappear as you actually add them so that, you know, if, especially if they're exact dupes, you're like, I don't know which one it is. You could just keep adding them forever. And then you click on merge. And as usual, you get a choice of, are you really sure you want to do that? Or did you want to cancel? And I'm going to say, yeah, I'm sure. And I click on merge and ta-da! Now when I go to the browse subjects and I go to screen 3, and now all we have is bakers and bakeries, and the records that were linked to the other ones are all smooshed into this one. All right. Are there any questions?
Let's see. We have a question. Is there a way to bulk merge agents?
Not in the interface. I believe you could probably do it via APIs, etc., if you're familiar with that. I'm not, so I couldn't tell you.
Great. And then any recommendations for merging agents or subjects at scale? This seems pretty inefficient for institutions that need to do a lot of cleanup.
Yeah. I was lucky or unlucky, as the case may be, when I had to do it a lot. It was before that comparison thing was added, so I was able to do agents just like I was able to do subjects. But yeah, now you can't. I don't know. You could probably get some third-party macros that would work to do it and set those up. Or, students are always looking for work. But
Um,
if you can't use the API, then yeah, you can't really do a mass merge of agents in the interface anymore.
For agent record merges, if users have permission to merge records but not to work with full mode and/or see contact info, do those fields show up when merging, or are the users flying blind and potentially losing data that they can't see?
My guess is they're flying blind. So I think if you are having somebody work um, at this level on agent records, you should probably let them see all the data.
Okay, and we had one one question that I answered in the Q&A about how do you import an agent record from Library of Congress. So I sent the information on the LCNAF plugin, but yeah, if you have time to show it, that would be great.
So yeah, it's the only pre-supplied plugin in a default database. You could import LCNAF records or LCSH records. Um, this is a keyword search, so you could do last name, first name. You could do first name, last name. You could actually search on the 010 field in an authority record. Whatever those are called, the identifier number. So you can search that way, Aretha Franklin, and of course it comes up as Franklin Aretha. If you're going to do LCSH, you don't need this rest of the name thing. You could just do Valentine. Do a keyword search again and find things that way. So let's select that. So you would select the heading. You could select multiple if you want from your search results. You could actually even do yet another search, and it'll add it to this menu over here. If you have one of these and you didn't mean to select it, you could click on the garbage can and throw it away. And then you click on import, and it'll import the headings that you've, and refresh page, and then you could actually see the records. Ta-da! Alrighty. If there's no other questions, we will take a 15-minute break. So come back at 12:30, is that right, Rice? Well, 12:30 my time. So whatever your time is in 15-minute increment. On the 30. I will stop sharing. Oh, welcome back, everybody. We're going to move on to managing top containers, which you can do in bulk. A top container is the highest level container in which an archival object is held. Sometimes it may be the only container, and other times it may be the external container, which then holds additional containers. For example, a box that holds folders that can also be tracked in ArchivesSpace. A top container record provides a mechanism for linking many archival objects to the same container, thereby increasing efficiency and providing the ability to perform bulk operations on these containers. For example, if you move box 1 in a collection to a new location, using top containers enables you to update that location once rather than for each archival object in that box, as required in past versions of ArchivesSpace. So the bulk operations functions allows you to perform certain actions over a set of records rather than by opening the records individually to make changes. So from the settings menu, you would click that and you would choose Manage Top Containers. Um, You can search for containers using a variety of search options, including keyword, barcode, resource records, and you could also search by whether it has associated containers or does not have associated containers, or has a location or does not have a location. Let's go ahead and use our infamous Krispy Kreme again. It has type ahead, so you select the resource record that matches it. Obviously, you could also do this and you could browse if you need to. And then you would click on search and it would find all the records for that resource, all the top container records for that resource. Um, Note that the bulk operations button here is actually grayed out. It won't become available until you actually select at least one item in the list. So I've selected this one, and now bulk operations is available. You can select one and skip two and select another one and skip two and select another one. So you could do it that way, or you could, select them in order. Or if you want to select all on this screen, you would use this box in the corner. And then if you don't want any of these, if I want to unselect them, I would click the box again. So that's pretty handy to use. Let's see. Let's do the first 5 boxes. 2, 3, 4, 5. And do some bulk operations. So under bulk operations, you get quite a list. We could update the ILS holdings ID. I'll show you that screen. If you have like probably it'll be the ID number from your ILS. You could put that number in here and it would be associated with all these. Not very useful. Again, I think it was done by a particular library and they just put it into the code because what didn't hurt anything. But if you like to use it, feel free. I'm going to click on cancel. Container profiles. Does this thing even have container profiles? So bulk operations, update container profiles. Let's go and update our repository preferences for top container, browse and management, and all that stuff so that, yeah, it's supposed to be there in column 6, and so is the location. And container profile, save preferences. Okay, now we will go back to here and manage top containers and search. There we go. So they're all in legal box. Let's click the first 5 again. 3, and do that. And container profiles. So we can browse for a container profile, or we can create a container profile. I'm going to browse for a container profile, and I'm going to move all these to oversized storage. And we'll click on that, and we click on link, and then you have a choice of updating it or changing your mind and saying cancel. We will go ahead and update it. Please be aware it'll take a minute for the reflections to take place. So we'll click on continue and go ahead and look at other options. So we got bulk operations. We've done the container profile. Eventually it will catch up with us. Update locations. We got single or multiple locations. If you were going to take all 5 of these and move them to the same location, but not the location it's currently at, you would click on single location. And so I would click on a single location, browse here, and pick something else that's, so I could click on that, no holdings for this repository, and I could say link, and I could say, oh yes. So then all 5 of those records would be updated eventually. If I do search again, you could see that the container profile finally caught up with us. And so they're in oversize here, but of course this hasn't, but it will. But let's do the next 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, that's probably enough. Let's do multiple. So if instead of all of them going to the same location, I want these 3 to go to 3 separate locations, you could use multiple, and you get this box where it lists them, and then you get the drop-down menu where you could browse or create a location and link it. And I could choose a different location for this one. We'll do that and link it. And if I leave this blank, then it won't change at all. So we'll leave that one blank. And we'll, even though it says it's going to update 3 records, it's only going to update the 2. So we do that. You get the message again. And ta-da! So if I do the search again, so these have changed to the section C. Obviously, numbers 6 and 7 haven't changed yet, but they will. What else? Rapid barcode entry. So 2, 3, 4, 5. If I wanted to add barcodes to these, because you want to do them in bulk instead of one at a time, you could go ahead and do all your work and then come in, highlight the records that you need to add the barcode to, do bulk operations, do rapid barcode entry, and then you could just scan the barcodes in, which obviously I don't have a scanner, but let's say we did. And then you would just tab to the next line. You don't have to use your mouse. And so that's pretty handy. And we'll click on update 5 records. And yes, we now know it's going to take forever. So that's rapid barcode entry. If you want to change the indicator number associated with the containers and indicate the new indicator, and give it a new indicator. So if we wanted to take boxes 1 through 5 and rejigger them, we could do that. So we would select bulk operations and update indicators. So this one is indicator 1, and I want it to be 5. And I want this one to be 4. I want this one to be 2. I want this one to be 3, and this one to be 1. So I will click on update 5 records, and yes, take all the time you need. And now the boxes will be updated when it all catches up. So, ta-dum. You can merge top containers. If you want to merge one or more container into a single container, select the containers you want to merge together and then click on Merge Top Containers. So instead of using a Krispy Kreme example, let's look up the things that are in oversized storage. Number 2, and then do a search. And so these are the things that are in oversized storage, type 2. We have here a folder and a box, and I want to put that that folder in the box so that I don't just have a folder record. So I'm going to select both of these. And then I'll click on Bulk Operations and Merge Top Containers. All right. This message up here is trying to tell you what you should be selecting. What you want to select is the container you want to keep. So I want to keep the box, and I want the folder to go in the box. So that's why I'm selecting the box one. You can't select multiple. It'll just change. So you can't mess it up that way. There's plenty of other ways you could probably mess things up, but not this one. So I want to keep the box one. I select Merge Target, and it gives you a message in screaming pink. It's like, are you really, really sure? Because this is going to delete something. And I can say, yes, I want to, or I can say, nope, you're right, and I can cancel it. So I'll merge the two records. And now there's no type with a folder. So it's gone. Yay! You could also delete top containers. Um, Most people use this with the unassociated containers search. So here you got a blank line, which means I don't care if it's unassociated or not. I'm trying to use one of these other fields for searching. If it does have unassociated containers, I want it to show up, or if it doesn't, then I would select no. So I'm going to click on yes because I want it to not be associated with resource or item or any other kind of record. So I click on unassociated containers, click on search, and here are all of the items that are not connected to a resource or a session record. So I could select them all, or I could just do a few, like the second number 1, the real versus the box. So maybe I'll get rid of the box. So let's just do 1, bulk operations, and then delete top containers. And then it's going to list all the ones you want deleted. In this case, there's just 1. And again, do you want to delete it or you not want to delete it? We're going to go ahead and delete it. Ta-da! And scroll down and it's gone. So that's how you delete the top containers. So any question about top container bulk operations before we move on to the hard one?
Nope, you're good.
Good. All right.
Oh wait, sorry, we had one just come in.
All right.
When merging top containers, will that box then show the folder within it?
I really couldn't say. I would recommend practicing on the test sandbox thing to see if that goes there. Because I'm not sure what happens to the instance record, archival object record it was in. It'll probably just say box 1 instead of folder 1. Yeah, because it won't get rid of the archival object. It's just the top container field information that would change. But I always recommend when you're trying one of these things for the first time to use the sandbox, or if you have your own sandbox, to use that. All right. Let's do, I created a record to work with here. So I got the Studio Ghibli collection and listed some of the films. As you could see, they have fake boxes and fake cartons, but they don't have any digital objects associated with them. And I have not created digital objects. So what I'm going to show you is how to import via a spreadsheet digital, well, you're going to be, in the import, you're going to be creating the digital object and linking them to the archival object at the same time. So in newer versions of ArchivesSpace, the bulk import templates are available for download under the gear menu here. So you would click on that and you would say bulk import templates. And there are two for bulk importing digital objects to existing archival objects in a resource record. One is this one with the CSV that is in CSV format, and this one that is that could be open, that can be used in Microsoft Excel. Well, obviously both of them can, but the CSV is plain text. It's not going to give you any helpful information. You are really going to need to know what you're doing at all times. If you have access to Microsoft Excel or Google spreadsheets, because it'll open there also, I recommend downloading this one because it'll give you helpful hints that, especially if you don't use it very often, that you'll be able to refer back to. So if you click on download, it downloads it to your favorite download folder. I'm going to open up that folder. So here's the template that I downloaded. If I open it up and enable editing, this is what it looks like when you do use the Excel one. You get some pretty colors, and the red indicates required fields, and there's helpful mapping information that'll help you try to figure out what all these fields mean. This top line, you could leave it as is. It's just for your use. You could just give it like the name of your resource record. That way you could keep it, you could find it amongst all your other spreadsheets, because eventually you'll end up with way too many spreadsheets because everybody saves. That's why we're archivists, right? As long as you do not ever delete this line right here, the one that says ArchivesSpace digital object import fields codes, you can rearrange these lines, hide these lines, or delete these lines, well, columns, to your heart's content. Unlike the other importers, this spreadsheet is not very long, so it stops right there, so that's pretty handy. There are, as usual, required fields. You have to either have an EAD ID or a resource URI. Now, your EAD ID is going to be, oh, not that. There it is. Let's go back. Your EAD ID is found in your Finding a Data section, and it's here, the EAD ID, and that is what you're going to put in there. Some people don't use the EAD ID, and so they would not be able to use it. They would have to use the other doohickey, the resource URI. So let me paste that in there. I prefer the EAD ID because it's just so much shorter and easier. But the resource URI, the easiest way to find your resource URI is to download, export, whatever you want to call it, and the EAD record, which I have done, and here it is. And the EAD ID is going to be in this repository section under unit ID type URI. So it's going to be this /repositories to resources /24 field. And so that would be what I would put into the resource URI if I would rather use that instead of the EAD ID. Okay, so then the other field that are required is either the reference ID or the archival object URI. So the reference ID can be found in Let's go Control Home. Let's call up Castles in the Dark, Castles in the Sky. Your reference ID is right here. For the most part, people usually let ArchivesSpace create this ID for them. Um, and so it's usually a bunch of gobbledygook numbers and letters. Um, and so you could copy that and you could paste that into the reference ID if you desire. The archival object URI, I'll cover in a few minutes. And where to get that. It's a combination of your repository number and the archival object number. And yeah, it's easier actually than the reference ID, but either one is a pain. Now, you don't necessarily want to have to go into each one of these records and copy the reference ID. Um, to fill out the spreadsheet, because if I'm going to have a digital object for each one of these things, that will be very annoying. There is a way to get that information in this version, and I think it might be changing in the 4.0, but we'll show you how to do it in this version. So what you need to do is be at the resource record level. And then you're going to click on Export, and you're going to say Download Container Template. All right, so let's go to that folder and open that up. And here is the reference ID for all of them. So I could copy this whole thing and just paste it in there. Pretty easy peasy. If I prefer to use the archival URI, you would use the formula that I have already copied there. So I would paste that in there, and then it would also be and this. So what do we have here? You got the repositories. Mine is repository number 2. So it's the 2, that's what the 2 is referring to. And then archival underscore objects, and then that archival object ID, which I got from here, but it's also available if I go here. So 7610 is Castle in the Sky, and that's from here. So you could use that, and then like because it's a spreadsheet, you would just click and drag it down, and so you would have all that information that you could then paste into your archival object URI. You could fill out the rest of these fields here however you want. The digital object identifier, leave that blank as it says here. To get just a system assigned identifier, if you are at an institution that you guys make up your own identifiers, feel free to put that number in there. The digital object title field, if you leave that blank, it's going to use the title of the archival object as the digital object title. So that's usually what people like to do, make a match. So I would leave that blank. Publish, whether you want it published or not, yes, true or false. And then the URL for the representative file version. I'm not, this would be the thumbnail that would display in if they were doing a digital object search. So that would be what goes in here. Let's see. Where am I? The use statement, it's supposed to have a drop down. Oh no, the use statement. Whatever you want to, you need to use the controlled vocabulary terms, but in this spreadsheet, it doesn't have a drop down, so you would have to look that up. The X-link does, and in this case, I would suggest using on request because it's the thumbnail. And X-link, you're going to do, oh, well, It was there a second ago and then it disappeared. Let me open the one that has everything filled out. It's so much easier to use. So I decided to use the EAD ID. I use the archival object URIs. I'm setting everything to true. Here's the links, and everything's on request, and the X links are new. And I decided I didn't need any of that information. It's all optional anyway. If you want a caption, you could put a caption there. That's what would display underneath your thumbnail, I believe. And this is for the non-representative file. I have URIs for that. And I can make that false because it's not going to be published. And if I could also leave it blank because the default is not published. So you spend all day filling out your spreadsheet, and I'll close that. And then you go to here and you'll go to load via spreadsheet and select file. Dun, dun, dun. ArchivesSpace. You guys get to see all my files. Dun, dun. And bulk import. There it is. I could just validate it. Wait a minute. This is not right. I don't think this instance is set up correctly. Well, we could validate it, or I could actually do it. I'm going to go ahead and validate it and do import from spreadsheet. Refresh page. It seems to have validated. It says that it stopped at row 16, no header row found. Are you using the correct template? Yeah, see, that's what I was wondering. It usually you have to choose what kind of template you're using. So I'm wondering if it's the setup from this Lyricisy thing that we're using. Job has been submitted, click close. Well, in theory, that would have worked. Yeah, we'll do load. And if we do select file again.
Malaka, I think
Yes.
you're at the castle in the sky archival,
Oh,
but if you go up to the resource record level, that might help.
thank you. That will be a lot easier. Yeah. So there's the buttons I was looking for. So you could import archival objects, you could add digital objects to archival objects, or you could link top containers. We are going to add digital objects to archival objects. We're going to validate, and we'll do import. Oh, we got to select the file, obviously. And then we'll do import from spreadsheet. Ta-da! And hopefully that one works. That looks a lot better. So compiling results, and it validated A-OK. So we will go back here and take off the only validate and actually import. Well, let's close it and come back. Load that, select the file, Studio Ghibli, and import. I tried not to make it too long so that at least it will finish. And refresh the page, and it shows you that it created some records for you. So now it has moving images, digital object, and it has the boxes. So it did do the import, and you could actually go down here to instances and see that there's the box, and then there's also the digital object. You could click here to see the digital object. record with the 2 file versions. These are all made up, by the way, so they're not going to actually work. And we could try viewing the published. Yeah, so since the URLs were actually made up, that's why they're not going to work, but it is there. So there are some constraints. Only one digital object can be associated with a single archival object using the spreadsheet. So, and then the digital object can have up to 2 files associated with it, but no more. I'm sure as things are progressing, that will change, but at least in this version, that's what it is. So I'm sure there's questions.
Live demoing is not for the faint of heart.
No, especially when I don't, like I said, I don't use this template. We use
Yeah,
APIs and some other dude does it for me and I go, yay, thank you.
so courageous. We only have one question, and it's not about this exactly, but someone says this might be a bit off topic, but is there any movement toward including locations when bulk importing archival objects? Right now, I can bulk import archival objects, but then have to go to manage top containers to add the location information.
Um, I am no longer on the testing committee, so I don't keep up with what's coming down the pike. Rachel might
Yeah,
know.
same. I mean, so yeah, I'll put this in like the answer, but yeah, we don't know about this functionality specifically, but I can offer some sort of general observations of how you might learn that information. Um, so you can see what new or modified functionality is requested and or in the works by looking at the Jira dashboard, and I'll include the link. And you can comment on tickets that you want to support or have an opinion about. That really helps in terms of prioritization. You can also request new functionality, and I'll include the link to a document about how to submit a feature request. And sort of outside of those 2 systems, you can always start discussion about sort of functionality you wish existed or asking if it exists on the ArchivesSpace listserv. So I'm going to put all of that in the sort of the Q&A section, and it has some links. We do have a question about the digital object import. The digital object type column in the spreadsheet, are you supposed to list the value or the translation here?
I believe most of the spreadsheets let you do both. It looks for the value first, and then if it doesn't find a match, it'll use the translation.
Oh, great. And Bailey dropped the link to the how to request a new feature page in the chat.
Cool.
Thank you. All right. So let me share my screen again. We'll wrap it up. Okay. So this next section is very exciting. One, because the functionality is incredibly powerful and it's an efficient way to make edits across a resource record within the staff interface. And 2, this is something that's not yet out, but it will be available in the forthcoming 4.0 release. Some of you might already be familiar with this functionality. It began as a plugin developed by Hudson Malonglo for the New School, but it's currently being merged into the core code of ArchivesSpace. So it's very exciting that it'll be just part of the application for everyone. This functionality allows users to download a spreadsheet for a set of archival objects for a resource record. The spreadsheet can then be edited outside of the application to apply multiple changes to those archival objects. after which it is imported back into ArchivesSpace via a background job, which puts those edits into effect. You can only edit one resource record at a time, but this is a great way to do data cleanup on inventories, to change things like titles, dates, and even notes. And once you start using it, you are going to really appreciate how much time it saves you. And because it is soon to be available via the staff interface, it'll really empower individual users who may not have access to the API to think about and address data cleanup needs. So because this is not part of the core code yet, I'm going to be using a different test instance than the one that I was using earlier to demonstrate this. So just want to make sure. Yeah, okay, I have the correct one up. So what you want to do is navigate to the resource record that you want to work with. So I am going to work with this Rocky Chin Papers. And I'm going to open it up and edit because I feel like that'll be a little bit easier for people to see some of the things I want to change. So if I open up this inventory, I'm just going to open up series 1 for right now. I can see a lot of things that I immediately want to change. So this inventory has some different capitalization things happening. This first one is all in lowercase. Everything else is in uppercase. You can see this Asian Americans for Action newsletter, and the components right below it, there are no dates that I would like dates on. If I just go to one of these components and scroll down to the date, I can see that I have information in the date expression field, but I don't have anything in the begin or the end dates. And then vice versa, there's a few places, can't remember where it is exactly, maybe here. Yeah, where I have begin and end, but maybe I want things in the date expression. So there's a lot of kind of little stuff here in the inventory. Moving down to, let's see, I can't remember which series it is. Oh, this series. I can see that I have notes at the archivable object level. So I have all these like general notes for every folder saying that the collection's off-site. And I would really like for those not to be there. And then this last series, maybe I want to add notes for each of these interviews. So those are just a couple of sort of data cleanup examples that I'm just kind of throwing off the top of my head, but those are by no means exhaustive, of course. Another really common use case is when you do rehousing and or renumbering on a collection, where you might need to change a lot of box and folder numbers. So maybe you had a collection that was initially processed into record cartons, but now those boxes are so heavy and you want to split them up into manuscript boxes, which is going to require updating almost all of the box and folder numbers. So that is a lot to do manually. And if you don't have access to the API or want to be able to hand that work off to someone else, this bulk edit functionality is a really great way to get a lot of that done. So before I demonstrate some of this, I just want to remind everyone that it won't yet be available in the core code until the version 4.0 release. And because that release candidate is not out yet, it is possible that there are some specific ways that this behaves might change between now and that time. So don't hold me to exactly all of this, but the general kind of premise and a lot of the possibilities are going to hold true. So to get this started, I want to navigate to my resource record and I want to be at the resource record level. I'm going to click on this More button and I'm going to click on Generate Bulk Archivable Object Spreadsheet. So this is going to bring up a picker screen, and this is where you will select which archival objects you want to include in your spreadsheet. Just because they're included in the spreadsheet, it doesn't mean that you have to change stuff in that. You might want to select just the components that you know you want to edit. You might want to go series by series. You may elect to select the entire collection. It's totally up to you, although it is worth sort of being mindful that the larger your spreadsheet, the longer your job will take to run, and perhaps, you might want to sort of like build in some safeguards for yourself to sort of just prevent you from working on something you know you don't want to update. So it's sort of up to you. But this picker screen expands so that it's a little easier to navigate records with hierarchy and with lots of components. So I can select and deselect. I can, like I said, I can go series by series. I can select, an entire series and then deselect certain items. It's up to you. As you go, this selected records message or section at the top is going to update as you go to indicate how many records are going to be part of your spreadsheet. So right now, I am just going to focus on series 1, but we'll go through a few different examples to show you a few different use cases of things that you can do. I'm only going to scratch the surface of what's possible. So I really, hope this kind of lights your imagination, and then you can continue to find other use cases. So I have all of series 1 selected. And at the bottom here are some options to adjust what exactly will be included in my spreadsheet. You do not have to change this, but it can be a nice fail-safe if you want to intentionally exclude fields that you know for a fact you don't want anyone to have the ability to change. So for example, let's say that component unique identifier or ref ID are really important at your institution. And it would be really bad if someone accidentally changed anything there. So you can kind of eliminate that possibility by deselecting them from your spreadsheet. So the same is true with note types. You can decide if you want to only include certain ones. This can also just be really helpful in sort of managing cognitive load, as spreadsheets with lots and lots of columns can get really overwhelming. So, you can certainly pare down what is selected in your spreadsheet just to kind of make it easier for you to work with. But I'm gonna leave all the notes here because I kind of, as I work through it, I want to leave them up just so that you can kind of just have them in your brain to think about maybe other things you might want to do. And this last section is where you can change the number of subrecords and notes that display in your spreadsheet. This first option, called minimum subrecords, controls the minimum number of each subrecord to include in your spreadsheet. So for example, for the date subrecord, if we have it selected up here for dates, which we do, and the minimum subrecord is set to the value of 3, our spreadsheet will include at least 3 sets of date subrecord fields. So for example, like label, expression, begin, end, uncertainty, you'll have at least 3 sets of that. Hopefully that will all become clear when I actually download the spreadsheet and show it to you. Extra subrecords controls the number of subrecords to include in addition to the greatest number found in any of the selected records. So this can help you add new content that wasn't there before. And then minimum notes controls the number of each note type controls the number of each type of note subrecord to be included in the spreadsheet. So I am going to leave these defaults the way they are for now, but please know that you can change them to suit your editing needs. So once you've made your selections and you've adjusted all of these options to ensure that you have what you need, you are going to select Download Spreadsheet. And I, like Miloche, am going to venture into the frontier of a live demo. So here we have our spreadsheet. Let me make it a little bit bigger and hopefully easier to read. I like this functionality a lot because I feel like the spreadsheet is actually pretty intuitive and structured in a way that's pretty easy to understand and work with. You know, just sort of looking at this kind of makes pretty immediate sense to me, whereas some of the other import spreadsheets in the application have really had more of a learning curve. This is just my personal experience, but I hope this is true for you as well. So if we just review our spreadsheet, we can see that there's two sheets. We have this updates sheet and we have the enumerations sheet. You're not going to be working with the second enumerations sheet, but this actually refers kind of back to the controlled value list we were talking about at the beginning, where sort of it says what the values and the translations are for different controlled value lists. So just in case those drop downs don't work, like Miloche was showing you earlier, you can actually, you know, refer to this if you need to. But you will be working in this updates spreadsheet. So we're going to go back to that. Right now it's protected or it's locked. So I'm going to just right click and I'm going to unprotect the sheet. So we are going to make some changes. And I kind of just want to show you a little bit of a grab bag, but know that, again, we're sort of just scratching the surface. So things I can change. I can change this level of description for specific objects, for multiple objects. So right now we have our series and everything underneath is at the file level, which is what I want, to be honest. But let's say, for example, that you know, I want to call all these items. I can do that. I can change these to item. I can add structured dates where I don't currently have them. So you can see these first few objects have information in the date expression field, but nothing in the begin and end dates. So I can add that really quickly. So I'm just gonna do a few of those here. Not gonna do it all because I don't wanna just have you watch me type, but that is something that you can do. And we see that we have some missing dates. So these objects right here, these rows, there's no date information, and I would like date information. So I'm gonna add the creation label, and I'm gonna be a little bit lazy and I'm just gonna sort of copy this date range for all of them. And let's see, I thought there was begin and end, but oh, okay, yeah. So these, for example, this row right here, we have begin and end date, but we don't have anything in the date expression. If that was something I wanted to add, just for kind of more human readability, I could do that really easily. So, you know, these are all pretty quick and easy things that almost anyone can do. So you can do a lot of stuff with dates is the long and the short of it. The thing that was probably most apparent was the kind of wild capitalization that was happening. You can change that here. So you could just you could manually edit this if you wanted to. I'm a really big fan of Excel functions and was delighted to learn that there are functions regarding capitalization. So the quickest way for me to show you this is to actually create a new column and then delete it later. So if you do something like this, just be careful because your spreadsheet columns will have to match eventually. But I'm going to use the Excel function proper, select that next column, and then I'm going to drag this function all the way down so that it applies to everything here, which is a bit longer than I remember, but that's okay. And so again, very small. Let's make it bigger. You can see in this sort of scratch column that I created that it's the same as the column next to it, but in the proper capitalization. And what I'm just going to do is copy and paste it over. So I'm going to do copy. And if you do this, just remember, if you're dealing with functions, you want to do the paste special and values. So you don't want to paste the formula. And then I'm going to delete that column. So, you can make manual edits, obviously, but again, this is really powerful and you can combine it with things like Excel formulas. You could work with your spreadsheet in Open Refine if you like using that tool. Like there's a lot of possibilities for here that are worth looking into. You can also use find and replace. So something that that calls to me or makes me think of is like acronyms. So let me see. There's one in here that I remember. Yeah. So there's this Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance that shows up, excuse me, a few different times in this inventory, spelled out the full way the entire time. So I can use find and replace to change those. So find, replace, Asian Pacific American Labor Alliance, and I want to replace it with APALA. Although I need to remind myself to go back to this first one. So I'm going to say replace all. And it's made 5 replacements, which may not seem like a lot, but depending on how big your inventory is, could be a really big deal. So that's just one more thing that you can use this for. Excuse me. Another really common use case that I think I mentioned while introducing this functionality is a rehousing project. So if you're breaking a big collection, or sorry, a collection that was maybe in record cartons into smaller boxes because it was maybe too heavy. So let's say you started with 10 boxes, 1 through 10, and now after rehousing, you have 20 boxes. And so you need to update a lot of those box and folder numbers. So you can do that. You can do that here. So I'm not gonna go through it all, but just for kind of ease, let's just change the first few. So let's see, we'll say like box 5 remains, and it will still be folders 1 through 5, but maybe here we're actually going to say like this is box 6 now, and it's folder 1, and so forth. So you can make those changes really quickly, really easily, just within this spreadsheet. And that's just so much quicker than manually updating individual objects within the staff interface. So once we are happy with our changes, we want to save our spreadsheet.
Rachel,
Yes.
I don't know if it'll make a difference, but there's a couple of env renders, and with the proper, it made those capitalized.
Oh, that is a really good question. We'll find out. actually, maybe I will change those right now. So yeah, that is a really helpful consideration. Is that if you have any sort of like hand encoding or other kind of formatting, that you're mindful of anything you do like that. So we will change these just to hopefully avoid an error. Thank you, Malaka.
Well, somebody else pointed out, but yeah.
Thank you to whoever pointed it out. Yeah, if you're not live demoing it, it's worth like, you know, double checking your spreadsheet and being extra careful in that. I did test this before and that didn't throw an error, but I would prefer to not experience it. So we'll see. So I've saved my spreadsheet. So we are going to go back to ArchivesSpace now and go back to our, actually, no, we don't need to go back to our resource record, sorry, but I will close it. We are going to run this update via the background job section. So going to the gear icon, background jobs, create job, and the one that we want is called bulk archival object updater. And we want to find our file, which I believe is here, yes. And so there's this checkbox here called create missing containers. So this is sort of complicated to explain. By default, the operation will raise an error if there is a top container in your spreadsheet that is not currently attached to the resource record in ArchivesSpace. But if you check this box, those new or missing top containers will be created as part of your bulk update job. So this will come into play if you are perhaps doing one of those rehousing projects and end up creating more boxes than you started with. So that's when you would want to select that checkbox. But I did not do that with that spreadsheet. I just used existing boxes just to keep it a little more simplified. So I'm gonna start my job and hope that it runs and completes. So it runs just like any other background job. And again, the more changes that you're making and the bigger spreadsheet, the longer this will take. Oh, okay. Oh, okay. It is asking me for this top container. I thought, let me try this again with that selected. I do have a backup spreadsheet in case this doesn't work. Because it did work last time I tried it in preparing. Okay, well, we will try this again with a different file that hopefully will work. Ah, live demo.
So Victoria says it could be because you didn't change the barcode when you changed the top containers from 6 to 5 or 5 to 6.
Okay. Okay. Great ideas, everyone. I love this collaborative spirit. So I think what I might do is just try and put this container information back the way it was. And that way we can at least see the other changes that we tried to make. And that if you are doing this, you might want to look at that a little more carefully than I clearly am right now. Sorry about that. So I believe this looks correct beyond that container issue. I promise this worked on Friday when I was testing it, and it'll work for you too. Actually, wait, was I in the correct? Yeah, okay. Downloads, there we go. Okay, we got there. So this looks really similar to how other background jobs run, where you're getting kind of an update, you're seeing errors, not if, when they occur. And then you're getting a message if and when your job is completed successfully and how many records were updated. So I'm going to refresh the page. And we can see the records that have been modified. So let's just go back to the record to look at that. So here we have, so I was just working on series 1. And I'm realizing we're a little bit over time, but I just want to show you a few other use cases, and hopefully that will be okay. So you can see that our capitalization change worked. So everything is now in title case. The date changes, I think I'll have to open it up in edit mode. Those show up where we now have both expression and begin and end date. The fields that, or the objects that had missing dates, which I think started at this Asian Americans for Action newsletter, those have dates now. And then the that acronym that we used find and replace for, that was the first instance, but then we had it a little bit later on. So yeah, this APALA. So those all worked. So I'm just going to show you 2 more things really quick, and it might eat into our Q&A by a couple minutes, but I really want you to see other use cases for this functionality. So let's say that we want to add notes to the object level. So series 4, we have this oral history, these oral history interviews with individual oral histories. And so let's say maybe I want to add item level access notes, maybe item level scope notes or bio notes. You know, we wouldn't necessarily want to do that object by object. It would be really helpful to just import it or, you know, edit it in bulk. So I'm going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to select this last series with the oral history interviews. I'm going to leave all these defaults as are, even though I'm definitely not going to use all these things, but it's just going to be quicker. I'm going to download a new spreadsheet. And here we have just those objects. So let's see, I want to add here. And again, I'm doing this really quickly. Hopefully you'll do it with more care and attention and time. I'm going to scroll past all this stuff that I didn't want, but let's say I want to add access information. So maybe some of these are restricted, others are open. I can indicate that here. So I'm just going to be kind of quick with it, but we'll say that like some of these are open and others are restricted until 2075. And we'll just alternate. Okay, so okay. So that's the content of our conditions governing access note. It needs a, it doesn't need a label, but it does need begin and end dates if it's a restriction. So I'm going to say that it began in January 1st and ends January 1st of 2075. And then for the ones that do have restriction, I'm going to add the type of restriction. So both of these we're going to say are the donor imposed. So that's a quick way I can add conditions governing access notes to many things. I could also add scope notes. So I could say like this interview covers A. Topics include you get the idea. So I have scope notes, and I could also add bio notes for these different interview subjects. So I could say AC was born in whatever, ED grew up in was E. And then these, I'm going to change the label to say that they're biographical notes. So again, these are just really quick kind of placeholder text, but it gives you an idea of something that you can do. So I've saved my spreadsheet, and I will run this background job. Okay, and it's successfully updated. But so we can see we're at just this one interview, and I can see that I now have conditions governing access note. I have my scope note. I have my bio note. That one was open. This one had a restriction. So again, flying through this, but you can do a lot there. And then the last thing I want to show you, which will be no time, but this series 2, this is the one that had all those notes at the file level, and I would like to get rid of them all. So this is one of the places where the bulk functionality has an asterisk, but I want to tell you about it. So I'm going to download all of series 2 and get my spreadsheet and make it a little bigger. And what I want is to get rid of all of those general notes that say this box is offsite. So what I can do is clear the data from this column, save my spreadsheet, and run the job. Just as a spoiler, this job is going to fail. And I get this error message. It says deleting a note is disabled. Use app config bulk archival object updater apply deletes equals true to enable. So I can't delete the boxes right, or I can't delete these notes right now. But if this is something that you want to do, you just need to update your config file or ask your hosting provider to update your config file. And then once that change is applied, then you will be able to do what I just did and delete those notes. But you just want to be careful as you do this. So these are just a handful of potential use cases, but for sort of every subfield or field or subrecord that's available in this spreadsheet, there is a potential data cleanup option that you might want or need to pursue. So I hope that I've given you just a few ideas that will spark your imagination in that regard. Again, this functionality will be introduced in the core code in the next release. So you can look forward to that, and I'm sure there will be other training opportunities or demonstrations of how this functionality works. That's a little bit more expansive than what we've just done right now. So with that, there might be questions. We have time for Q&A about this or anything.
So we got some questions. To clarify, is this import an overwrite of the existing resource record or an update to facets of it?
So it doesn't change anything at the collection level, but it can change things at levels underneath. So you could use it to change series information if you wanted to. I think it's primarily used most oftenly to uh, edit inventories, but you can definitely edit series level information, but it does not change anything at the collection level.
All right. Does this bulk edit only apply to archival objects? What about linked digital objects?
There are fields and columns for digital objects that are available. I admittedly have not used this. So I have used this as a plugin, but I have never used it to do anything with digital objects. So I think I would recommend, staying tuned for when this is released to see what else people talk about, or trying it out as in a sandbox whenever that's available. So I know you can do some stuff with digital objects, but I'm not entirely sure the scope of it.
Victoria, who is from the new school, said that she actually uses the bulk editor spreadsheet to create and link digital objects. So maybe you can at least
Great.
add them. So we'll see when we get around to getting it. Two questions. If the resource is just a list of archival objects, could you add series to the list?
Um, I, to be honest, I'm not sure.
Okay.
You would have to try. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Sorry.
And then can you rearrange the order of the archival objects?
Um, I don't bel I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. I my instinct is to say no, but I don't believe so, but you would have to try, or you would have to test that. Okay,
Victoria
Victoria's
says
saying
no.
no.
So, could you add or remove formatting to titles or notes?
Um, yes, if it is like hand encoded, I think you likely could, but it would depend on what that formatting looks like.
And then, will there be an option to validate before you import? That would certainly be helpful, wouldn't it?
That would be helpful as demonstrated. So I'm using sort of like what seems to be the most current version of it. And that's not an option right now, but like I said, it's not completed, like the release is not completed, and I don't know where they are in the testing process. So it's possible, but I don't see that right now. That said, that would be a great example of maybe like a feature request um, is to kind of suggest that that would be really helpful.
And will these notes default to being published? In the current archival object import spreadsheets, you can select true or false to publish.
Let's see. Let me bring one of them up. I'm not sure. My guess is that it would, apply whatever sort of your default settings are to records you create, but I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm sorry.
And then, can fields like agent and subject be added to this bulk archival object edit spreadsheet?
Let's see. I would I would maybe be surprised, but um, I think it's always worth trying, but I would be surprised if that was possible, but I think it's worth a shot testing out. I'm sorry, you're all asking really good questions that I unfortunately don't have great answers for.
Well, that's all the questions I have so far. Are there any other questions on this or anything else we've demoed? Well, before you guys start bugging out, in your agenda is a link to a post demo survey thing. We would really appreciate if you filled out. This is actually a brand new, you're the first guinea pigs for this. So we want to know what parts of it you liked, what parts could be improved, like, or any other additional information like, oh, this was great, but I'd like to have a training on that kind of thing would be very helpful.
Okay, well, if there's no other questions, we can wait maybe another minute. All right, it looks like y'all have asked all your questions. So thank you so much. We really appreciate you joining us today. Um again, if you have any questions, feel free to send an email to archivesspacehome@lyrasis.org. And thanks again. Take care, everyone.
Bye.